I've got too much to do, too much life to live.
Robyn-Jane, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, I didn't know carnivore was a thing, that eating without carbs was a thing. But the short story is I actually prayed and I said, God, please help me because I've got so much pain. I'm worried I'm going to have to get a walker or even a wheelchair. And I was looking at my YouTube feed and this Dr. Ken Berry kept coming up and I thought he was crazy. So I didn't I didn't look at what he was saying, but one day heading came up, how to deal with chronic pain, and I thought, well, I'll have a look at that. And it made complete sense to me. And when I found out that carnivore was a thing, that you could eat without eating carbs, I was very excited about that because I knew that I was a carbohydrate addict. And I knew I was a food addict, and I didn't know how you deal with food addiction when you actually have to have food to stay alive. And so when I found you could not eat carbs and you could just eat meat and eggs and cheese and fish and all those carbless or low carb things, I was very excited about that. So I thought, well, I'm going to try this for 30 days. And after maybe half a week or maybe 1.5 weeks, the pain in my foot, which was an old injury, was so much better. And I felt really, really good. I had clear thinking. I didn't have the fuzzy thinking, which I had before. And my body felt light. And I started to wake up in the morning and actually want to do stuff instead of just getting out of bed and going, well, I suppose I have to do all this stuff. So that's part of the story. And another part of it is that a lot of people in my family are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And my sister had said to me, you should think about doing keto because you're probably pre-diabetic. Well, I might have been. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I was actually diabetic. But because of all the COVID shenanigans and my skepticism about the medical profession as a result, I wasn't going anywhere near a doctor because they were going to give me medicine which I knew would have side effects and probably wouldn't work very well. So I just carried on trying to eat healthily, and I'd already cut out gluten because I discovered a number of years ago that I needed to be gluten-free because I had similar problems to what I'd had before going on carnivore, but much more severe. So cloudy thinking, sore stomachs, just feeling like rubbish. So learning to eat without gluten and then cutting down on sugar a lot because I knew sugar was inflammatory. Having the discipline to actually do that and figure out ways around that had prepared me for being even more careful about what I eat. And so going on to carnivore, in a way, it was just like an extension of the discipline that I already had. And the other thing about it too that I'd like to comment is I choose to eat in a certain window. And I know that if I wanted to eat a piece of birthday cake or an ice cream or some fruit or whatever, I can do that. And I just choose not to because I don't like the results of that because I know I'm going to have pain. And so I have experimented a little bit. I've been doing carnivore for 10 months, more than 10 months now. And over the summer and Christmas time, which is in New Zealand is our summer holidays, I've been to a cherry farm with my grandchildren and picking cherries. So I had a handful of cherries and that was no problem actually. And we have wild plums growing on the side of the road. So our kids found some of those and picked them, and I had one that was enough to give me pain. I thought, oh, well, plums are off the list. And I also had my 70th birthday party around about New Year, and I made a carnivore cake, much to my family's surprise, I suppose you could say. So you get a big round piece of brie, put another little one on top, and decorate it with slices of salami, and I actually put olives and gherkins on it as well, and some parsley and stuff. So that was quite cool. Anyway, it was a big family and friends gathering because it was just fun to actually get together. And there was some birthday cake made by a friend, and I thought, oh, after everyone had gone, I thought, oh, I'm going to eat that. So I put it in my mouth, and it was so disgusting to me. I spat it out. I couldn't stand it. So my tastes have really changed. And even plain water tastes sweet these days. And a piece of parsley picked fresh out of my garden was so sweet that it was almost objectionable. So it's very interesting.
Wow. So you become that sensitive to things in just the 10 months.
Oh, I'll tell you what else happened. One day I had a whole lot of leftover meat on my plate, and there was a piece of rump, a piece of short rib, a piece of ribeye, and a piece of chuck. And all of those bits of meat all taste different. Where before I would have thought, oh, that's meat, okay. But now they've got a really distinct flavour. And so it's very cool.
You know, you're worried about, just a step back, you're worried about having to use a walker.
Yes.
And like, can you paint us a picture of, like, you know, how bad were things?
Well, I would get out of bed in the morning sometimes and couldn't actually bear weight on my foot. That means I couldn't stand on it. So I had actually wheeled my office chair into my bedroom so that I could get myself onto the chair and wheel myself around the house if I had to, or I had something to lean on. Some days I could hardly walk around the house. And that wasn't every day, but it was enough days to be very concerning. And I live alone because my husband has died. And so, you know, I don't want my kids to be looking after me or having even more horrifying thought going into some sort of care. I've got too much to do, too much life to live. I breed dogs, I teach music, I love going out and about and doing stuff, and I love my garden. And see those flowers behind me? Whoops, this side. They're all out of my garden. And it's been great because I've spent 2 years in this house, and the garden had one flower, one kind of flowers. So I thought that's got to be fixed. So I've extensively redesigned it, and I've been out there digging holes, planting dozens, probably 100, I don't know, 100 or more plants, and it's just great. So I do have some pain still sometimes, but it's nothing like before, and I'm hoping that will just continue to improve and go away. I had a lot of other things too. I had a lot of stomach pains every day. I had stomach pains, I had reflux every night. I sometimes had slurred speech for some reason. I don't know why. I was kind of in low-grade depression all the time. I didn't even realise. And I had anxiety attacks where it was just waves of anxiety for no reason. Nothing had changed. And I just eventually began to associate that with sugar. And so I used to call that anxious food. And in the afternoons, I would be so tired, I would have chocolate every day. A row of chocolate, or 2 pieces, or maybe 3 rows, usually not too much, but enough to just go to perk me up. It's a stimulant. So also I was just quite lethargic and tired all the time, and possibly had lower iron levels. So now I sleep better. And my focus is really good. I have mental clarity. My creativity is very strong. And I feel happy most of the time, feel very calm. And I notice my muscles are stronger too, because I breed dogs. And so to do that, I've got to pick up very heavy bags of dog food. And one day I thought, it's time to replace the stocks of dog food. So, I suppose I'll try and pick this up. I went and I just picked it up. And I thought, wow, I couldn't do that before. So it's really, really good. And there's so many good things about Carnivore, like it's cheaper. I couldn't believe it when I started find out that it's significantly cheaper than what I was doing before. And there's not so much rubbish in my rubbish bin. It's just, it's far less. And then you can not have to eat. So I haven't eaten today. It's midday. I don't care. I'll eat later when I want to. And if I don't have time, it's not going to matter. I can eat when I eat later. So, I was a food addict, and that meant that I always was thinking, what am I going to eat? Because I don't feel right, and I'm trying to eat something to make myself feel energized. And I was trying to eat healthy stuff, and I didn't eat a lot of junk food. Sometimes I would, but didn't eat a lot of junk food, and it didn't really work very well. So now I just feel free, and I know what to eat. It works, and I don't have cravings. And actually, I've got a bunch of tips for cravings if anyone wants to know.
Nice.
Let me tell you, I wrote it down. Okay, so this is what I do. If I've got cravings, it will be cravings for carbs. I eat a lot of food. I'll eat foods on my list, and there'll be things like fat and salt and meat, but especially fat. So in the early days when I had cravings, I was eating butter. I would eat 125 grams of butter every day for a long time, and I think my body needed that to heal. So if I had cravings, I go, right, I'll just slice off a piece of butter and eat it like cheese. And when I cooked eggs, I'd put heaps of butter in. Yeah, so that's, as well as that, to overcome cravings. Sometimes we have cravings because we're thirsty, and just a drink of water, a big drink of water might be what we need. And sometimes it's because we're tired. And if we're tired, the obvious answer is to get some sleep. But if you can't, just have the water, have the food, and hang in there and do something else. Do something that you're not thinking about food. So do something fun or something that keeps you absorbed. That's what I do. And so I haven't ever needed to give in to those cravings of wanting carbs, because I've got a really strong why not to, because I don't want that pain back. But, so that's what I do. I just have those strategies. And the other thing is sometimes we can emotionally eat because we're trying to kill the pain of something. But that actually doesn't work. It just makes it worse. So you might as well not do that. You might as well just deal with it, whatever it is that's so painful. Face it and get help if you need to.
Yeah.
And so that's.
I agree. Like, that emotional eating can be terrible. You're trying to dull the pain somewhere else in your life.
Yeah.
And that's it. It can be eating, can be smoking, can be drinking.
Yeah.
It could be. It's not good.
It can be working too hard. It's another thing.
That's right. Yeah.
You're so exhausted you can't think straight. Yeah.
So you mentioned that before, in the before times, you'd be feeling really tired, and then you would eat to try and feel a little bit better, and then that would kind of has the reverse effect.
Yeah, it does.
So now, I mean, I guess that the alertness is it's just another world for you now. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes. So it's like, I think of it like it's running up like on a diesel motor. You just got steady energy. Before it was up and down like this, tired, then hyper, and so now it's just a steady stamina. And so I'm really still amazed, because at my age a lot of people don't even get around very well, but I can be out in the garden all day long, and I'm not a racehorse. I'm just steadily doing stuff, and it's fine. And so I might come in and eat a meal. I usually eat about 11:30 every day, but sometimes I will wait. Sometimes I'll eat earlier. Sometimes I eat once a day. Sometimes I usually eat twice a day. And it also depends if there are grandchildren here. So I might, if they're eating, I'll eat with them. I've had 5 grandchildren here over the holidays some of the time, because January is our holidays, December and January. And I remember one morning there were 5 of them, so I cooked 21 eggs, and they ate the lot. I didn't actually eat any that day.
So how is it, 5 grandkids, like compare kind of 11 months ago to now? What's it like? What's the difference running around with 5 grandkids?
I wouldn't have been able to do it, that have the stamina to do that and look after them and keep up with them. And yeah, it's been really amazing. But what I would like to talk about, Dave, if you don't mind, is possibly going to help other people, because the story of why it's not just joint pain that has happened to me, but it's my weight as well. So as a child, a young child, I remember when I was 6 years old becoming aware that I was very fat. When I was a preschooler, which would be 4 years old, I don't believe I was, and I don't know what happened to change that suddenly, but then right through school, I was a fat child, and there weren't many of us. There was probably a couple of us in my class. Class would be about 30 kids, give or take 5, and in those days. And so the other kids, they made a point of letting me know that was weird. So I was very conscious of that, and I'm also very tall. So for just a reference, I'm 6 feet tall. And so there's no way that someone like me can fade into the background. I just stand a head taller than a lot of people, especially women. And so I tried right from my teenage years. My mum was dieting, and she gave me her diet pills. Well, that kind of worked. But then I just put it all back on, and probably more. And then as I became adult, I tried to restrict what I was eating, because it would seem obvious that if you eat less and move more, then you're going to lose weight. But the problem is that never ever worked for me. And so I tried Weight Watchers, and I tried Atkins actually. I tried another thing called Sure Slim, which was very successful. And what they do is they give you a menu and you stick to that. The only problem is that you can't live like that for the rest of your life with a menu. And then also, as I got into middle age and got older, I sometimes got quite skinny. One time I counted bites. So, right, this meal is going to be 15 bites or whatever. I can't remember the numbers now. And it certainly worked, but I was starving. And so, as soon as I stopped focusing on counting bites, all the weight came back on. And that happened over and over and over. And another time it happened was my husband died. That was 9 years ago. And contrary to my usual way of coping with stuff, I just lost interest in eating. And I didn't really eat. Well, I ate a little bit, but I didn't eat much. So I got quite skinny. And I thought, yes, this is a positive thing to come out of this horrible situation. Because he just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. So it was a very big shock. And I was just 61, young. So, and he was my best friend. So it was terrible. But anyway, I lost this weight and I thought, oh yes, but it all came back on. So, because I didn't know how to live, and I tried to go back on my Sure Slim stuff, and that didn't work. And I worked it out later is because it had too many carbs and not enough protein and not enough fat. So I just gave up. And I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to be overweight. But because I'm so tall, I don't look too terrible. But it was uncomfortable bending down. I couldn't take a deep breath, like a full lung full of air, for decades, because I guess I had a lot of visceral fat. I'm not sure, but I can do it. I can breathe now. And, just doing everyday life when you're heavier, you're carrying around a whole lot of excess weight. So I started off carnivore at 98 kilos. And now I'm 80 kilos, and that's 18 kilos, and that in pounds is about 40 pounds. And that's huge. And it was so effortless. I'm astounded. I just can't believe it. I went from a size 18 jeans, and now I can squeeze into 10s. And in the United States, that's actually size 8. So I'm just really amazed and grateful. And that's why you can't shut me up once I start talking about this. I'll tell you what I think you can hack. What I think you can take in. Some people don't want to listen about it, actually. Some people are curious. And I'll have to tell you something exciting. My son, after 1 month, I sent the Dr. Ken Berry video about the dealing with chronic pain to him, because he had chronic neck pain, such terrible pain that he would go to bed at night and be afraid to go to bed because he knew he'd wake up in the morning and it would be worse. And he's a mechanical engineer. He couldn't work because looking down at a computer just was unbearable. And he was practically living on painkillers. And he was miserable. And he would say to me, he said to me, I went to the orthopedic surgeon and they said, oh, well, your neck's not bad enough to fuse it all together into one solid thing, so you're just going to have to live with it. And my son thought to himself, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to live on painkillers which are going to, be at risk of damaging my kidneys and stuff? So he was really, really motivated to try something. So he's been carnivore about 9 months. Actually, I think he's more towards the keto, but heavy into carnivore. And his life has been transformed. And so he told me that over the summertime, the family went tramping, and they take videos and films and come back and edit them. He said, I spent 12 hours editing, and all I had in my neck was a little bit of stiffness and no pain. And the other thing he said to me is I used to turn my head like this and I could hear my neck crunching, but now it turns and it's smooth. He said, that's not, people don't know that can happen. You can heal. So that's very exciting. And the other exciting thing that happened that's quite noteworthy is a friend of mine who's quite chubby decided that she would do carnivore too when she saw what had happened to me. And she had a thyroid problem, and her thyroid markers were very wrong. And her doctor said to her, "You've got to go onto this thyroid medication. You'll be on it the rest of your life." She said, "Can you give me a little bit of time?" And she did carnivore, I think, for a month, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 6 weeks. Went back and did, or might be 2 months, I don't remember exactly. Went back and did the test, and her thyroid markers are right in the normal range. It's just life-changing for people. It's amazing.
Yeah, this is awesome. Honestly, this is great. You're going to have the whole of Christchurch on this before long.
Hopefully. The other thing about my friend with the thyroid, the thyroid that's okay now, she said, I'm fitting into clothes that I haven't fitted for 8 years. So, so that's exciting. So yeah.
So, like for your friend, what was it that really convinced her to give it a try? Was it the weight loss she saw in you, or was it more like the energy that you had, or the lack of pain?
I don't really know, actually, because I hadn't lost that much weight when she started. I think I just told her how amazing I felt, because I do. I feel amazing. I just feel right. You know, I feel happy. I feel like confident. I mean, I was pretty confident before, but I feel, I don't know, bubbly. I feel happy. Yeah. And my skin has changed. I think she noticed that I looked healthy. I think that's really what it was. And I did a really deep dive into nutrition when I found out about carnivore. I don't know how many hours I've spent listening and learning, probably many, 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 hundreds of hours. So I know a lot of detail and a lot of facts, and they make sense. And a lot of this, I mean, I know that a lot of the stuff that's been taught and is in practice at the moment in mainstream medicine and nutrition is off. It's motivated by a lot of wrong things, like assumptions, for example, that aren't checked, and so-called studies that have been done that are paid for by people who've got vested interests in big pharma or big food. And then there's pride. I mean, what say you've done 6 years to be a doctor, and then someone comes along to your practice and says, well, you've got it all wrong. I mean, are you going to believe him? So you're going to stick to your guns and say, well, I've studied, you haven't, so go away. You know,
a big hit to the ego, right?
Yeah. So, well, I guess there'll be, not everybody will be like that. There will be people who go, well, that's interesting. But the problem is that if you're in the medical system, you've got a lot of restraints. And I actually feel very sorry for doctors and GPs, because they have actually been through a very difficult time where their values have been compromised. And I think some of them must be very unhappy in their work just because they're not allowed to think for themselves and do what's right. They're just restricted. And the same in other medical, like dietitians and stuff like that. If you're going to go against the flow, you might lose your registration, might lose your job. How are you going to support yourself if you don't have a job?
Yeah, and then the sad thing is it comes down to that, right? It comes down to well, I can say what I think is right, or I mean, I can make sure I keep my job and support my
Yeah,
family and that kind of
yeah.
thing, right?
The other
It's
thing about
terrible.
I've noticed about doctors, I've been to the doctor a few times in the last few months, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And I've noticed that they're very tired and very busy. So the first time I went was, well, actually, I had I had a terrible flu bug, which was not COVID. I've had COVID at least twice, and I didn't even know I had it for the first time for about 5 days, and then it suddenly a light bulb went on, and I went, everyone else around me's got COVID. I suppose that's why I feel a bit off. So that was COVID the first time, and the second time I went, nah, I'm not feeling quite right. It feels like when I had COVID, I think I probably got COVID, but who cares? I just carried on my life as normal. But this other particular time, I had influenza, and I was actually very sick, and it went into my chest, and I say I had to go to the doctor, and that was one time. But then after I'd been on Carnivore 3 or 4 months, I thought, well, I don't actually know what my bloods are doing. I suppose I better get them checked in case this is a really terrible idea that I'm doing, and I can stop it in time if it's terrible. Well, they all came back really, really amazingly good, and my blood pressure is right not in the bang of normal, and I also got a fasting insulin test done, and that was the first time my doctor had ever ordered one. They don't tend to do that in New Zealand. And he didn't realise, well, I think it's important to know what your insulin's doing. But he didn't think that was important. They just test blood glucose. And so my blood glucose, I think, was 5.4, which is, the A1C was 5.4, which is really good. And the insulin, I don't remember what it was, but it was also very good. And I expect that if I had any diabetic stuff or pre-diabetic stuff going on, which I'm pretty sure I did because I felt so terrible some days, just like really, really, really exhausted. And if I ate something sugary, I was in a situation once where that was the option, and I should have had nothing, but I didn't realise, and I felt terrible for 2 or 3 days. Just because of a real overload of sugar into my system, my body couldn't deal with it. So I'm pretty sure there was something going on. But I think all that healed quite quickly on Carnivore. So, and then the other time I went to the doctor was I fell over. I had a problem with my clothesline, actually. It broke and fell down with a clothesline full of washing, and it took me down with it, and I hit my head on the concrete. And quite badly bruised my leg as well because I fell on top of the pole. And anyway, I went to the doctor just to make sure that there was nothing to worry about. And he said to me, "You are so lucky. That could have been much worse with the bang that you had." So yeah.
So that was just recent. That was the reason we rescheduled this interview.
About 10 days ago. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm good. I've got a big bruise that's coming out of my leg. Still, it's still developing and coming out, but that will go away. Be fine.
Nice.
And my head is fine. I had a headache for a few days, but that went away as well. Yeah.
So I'm interested. You mentioned when the grandkids around, you made like 21 eggs and whatever.
Yeah.
How the parents like, oh yeah, that's okay. They're going, what are you doing, Mum? You're giving the kids eggs.
Well, a couple of those kids come from my son, who's the carnivore. So he was, yay! And those 2 children, one of them's 8 years old, a girl, and the other one's 13. He's a boy. So they were staying at my house much longer because their parents live in a completely different part of New Zealand. So they had eggs every day, and that little girl would eat three or four eggs most mornings. Sometimes that was too much, and she would only eat the equivalent of maybe one or two, a few days, but most of the time she ate that. And by the way, those kids don't like bacon because it's too salty. So, you know, it's just that they know what's good for them. But it was quite.
The thing is,
it's nice and easy.
Yeah, so, and you're giving them the right stuff, right?
Yeah,
like it's got, they're gonna have stable energy, and it's great.
Oh, you know what the best thing about that was? They actually put 3 cubic meters of compost onto my gardens, and about I don't know, 20 bales of pea straw, and because they had the energy to do that. So they just did that, and I paid them. That makes it much easier for grandchildren to do things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. So how big is the property you're on?
I think it's 1,400 square meters. So that's about bigger than a quarter of an acre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And
so I've got dogs.
Oh, okay. What kind of dogs are there?
Papillon dogs. So I have a little pack of papillons, butterfly dogs.
Okay. They're very quiet.
Sorry? Oh, yes,
they're very quiet.
They're in the garage at the moment because they could be a huge distraction. So, yeah.
So you mentioned before, like, before you went carnivore, you had like one flower in the garden, but like now you've got the energy. You're just out there all the time. You're planting flowers. You're tending to the garden
trees
all
and
the time.
shrubs. Planted camellias, azaleas, rhododendrons. Planted cherry blossom trees, but actually I didn't plant those. My son dug the holes for those because the ground at my location is very, very stony and difficult. So, but with the compost that's been added on top and some help, it's becoming much easier. So, but yeah, so he planted those, and planting it all and making sure that everything is, all the colours coordinate, because I also am an artist. Well, I was in a past lifetime. So I love colour, and I know how colour works, and I know how textures work, and I know how to design. So yeah, I wanted it to look not just ordinary, not a mess, but to actually just be beautiful, because life has been hard for the world in the last 4 years or so, and just creating beauty is really therapeutic. And then I can pick the flowers and give them to people too, which is so much fun, because they're just so pretty. Yeah.
Nice. So, I mean, this is an amazing turnaround. Just 11 months ago, you were struggling with energy, struggling to get out of bed, and now you're doing so much in the garden. You've got all this energy. You're running around after your grandkids.
I feel so young. I have never felt this good that I can remember, and I feel far younger than I did before. Like, I don't know, decades younger. It's amazing. I'm astounded, and that's why I keep talking about it, and that's why I wanted to tell you about it, because it might help other people. Encourage them and go for it, and don't compromise. Don't cheat. Why would you want to put stuff into your body that's going to make you feel yucky? You might as well fuel your body with the fuel that makes you feel, I was going to say like Superman, but like Superwoman. Well, just alive, really alive. And now I can see that instead of thinking, well, I'm getting old, I suppose my life is, my walls are closing in on me and I don't like this. Now I'm going, wow, what can I do next? So
it opens up the future, right?
yeah, it does. Yeah, it's so good, so
So
so good.
so what's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's ready to get started with carnivore?
I think it depends where they're coming from. If they're unsure, I think they should try it for 30 days, but they've got to do it properly. And I eased into carnivore over a couple of weeks. And so probably in about day 5, I thought, I'm going to have a couple of squares of chocolate. Well, I started eating it and I thought, this is not as good as I remember. And also I used electrolytes to make sure that I didn't get keto flu. So I never did. I think focusing on it. So what I did was, when I became convinced that it was a really good idea to do this, I cleared everything out of my cupboards that was nothing to do with carnivore, except for the stuff which I'll feed visitors. And there, I have cookies in my cupboard, out of sight. I have raisins and dates and peanuts and canned fruit and stuff like that, which I have no interest in eating. I just don't care. And jam, actually, and that sort of stuff. But everything in the fridge that I can see when I open the fridge is my stuff, which is meat. I do have butter there, but I don't use that much now because it actually tends to make me cough. Eggs in there, and the same in the freezer. And anything which, I've got a bag of frozen boysenberries, for example, which the grandchildren were eating. So that goes into another freezer, out of sight, out of mind, in the bottom drawer, where I know it's there, but I never see it when I'm in my travels. And I moved all the cans of fruit and stuff out into a hallway cupboard, which I only open every now and then. I know it's there. It's out of sight. I don't care. I don't want it. And another thing that I think is really important is to have your food. So I cook 3 kilos of my favourite food, which is beef short ribs. I really love those. And at the moment I'm roasting some. I just cook them very gently in the oven for 2 or 3 hours, or 3 hours or so. And then I stick that in the fridge, in the oven dish, and I eat that over the next 3 or 4 days. Maybe a little bit longer, however long it takes me to eat them, I don't know. I just eat as much as I want. And so I've always got food there. And the other thing I do is chop some of that up and freeze it, so that if I'm on the run and I don't have food, I can just grab that and take it with me. Because I do a lot of driving. Well, just because my family lives half an hour away, so if I want to go and look after the children later on in the day, I'll do that. So it's an hour return trip. And if I'm doing anything else at the same time and going shopping or something, could be another half an hour's driving. And if I'm showing dogs, I'll be all over the place. I could be anywhere in New Zealand, really. And so it's about 1,000 kilometres from where I am, down from one end of the island to the other. And then there's the North Island, which is about the same. Well, I don't go there much to show, but because you've got to go on a ferry, and it's just harder. But yeah, so I just take the food with me. So I think you've got to commit to it if you're going to do it. Don't just puddle around and try and then go and strike a problem and go, oh well, this didn't work. I heard about one person who tried carnivore for 2 weeks, and their gut was not quite right, and so they went, oh, that doesn't work. But you have to realise that if you haven't been eating properly, your body needs time to adapt. And so if, for example, you're eating a lot of fat, you won't necessarily even have enough bile to start with until your body can actually increase production to the right level, because it's just atrophied because you haven't been using it. So, yeah, just keep going. And, you know, you can have a problem with diarrhea or constipation, so just figure out a way to deal with it in the meantime while your gut sorts itself out. So it took me quite a while for my gut to come right in that department, because I believe it was quite damaged from from gluten in the past, and maybe the other stuff. I was eating a lot of oxalates actually as well, a lot of almonds, almond milk, even spinach and stuff like that. I had no idea. I never heard of oxalates, and I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, we just think spinach is good for us. They say that. We think almonds are good for us. You know, let's just have as much as we can, and we'll be healthy.
That's right. Yeah, the health foods. Yeah. So another thing that actually I knew was giving me grief is vegetables from the nightshade family, like potatoes, tomatoes, aubergines, capsicums, those sort of things. So I had already been very cautious about eating a lot of that. Yeah, so
yeah.
Well,
Robyn-Jane, do you have an Instagram or a Facebook or a YouTube or anything if people want to reach out?
No, sadly. My advice would be to just watch the other people on YouTube, and you'll find out so much just by watching them.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us today. I really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome, Dave. All the best.